Let me start by saying I wasn't looking for trouble. I wasn't snooping, I wasn't jealous, and I wasn't one of those paranoid husbands who freak out when their wife wears red lipstick. But looking back, I can see the signs were all there, hiding in plain sight like a puzzle I didn't even know I was supposed to solve. My wife, Emily, was always the life of the party. 10 years married, and she still had that magnetic energy that made everyone want to be around her. Me? I'm Jason, the quiet guy in the background, happy to play support while she dazzled. It worked until it didn't. The first sign was the bed. I know that sounds crazy, but hear me out. Emily had always been a light sleeper, the kind who tosses and turns at every little sound. But suddenly, she was sleeping like a rock, out cold the moment her head hit the pillow. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I noticed she wasn't as affectionate anymore. No more goodnight kisses. No playful nudges under the covers. And I swear, the bed felt colder, like there was this invisible barrier between us. Then there was her car. Emily always kept it spotless, like the woman didn't even let Chloe eat goldfish crackers in the back seat. But one Saturday morning, I borrowed it to pick up some supplies for the yard, and it smelled different. Like cologne. Not the subtle kind either, the kind that punches you in the face and makes you wonder if someone rolled in it. I joked about it when I got home, something stupid like, "Did your boss spray you down with Axe body spray?" She froze for half a second, then laughed it off, saying she must have parked near a gym. I wanted to believe her. I really did. The biggest red flag, though? The playlists. Emily had this thing where she'd curate these long Spotify playlists for every mood. Road trips, working out, rainy days. For years, her playlists were filled with upbeat pop songs and sappy love ballads, the kind of stuff we'd belt out together on lazy Sunday mornings. But one day, I hopped in her car to grab something, and her phone auto-played a new list I'd never heard before. It wasn't her usual mix. It was sultry, seductive, songs about temptation and secrets, with lyrics like, "Tell me lies, tell me sweet little lies." It felt calculated, like she was curating a soundtrack for a life I wasn't part of. I shrugged it off as a coincidence, but it stuck in my head like a splinter. And then there was the phone, always on silent, always face down, and always with her, even when she was just grabbing a glass of water. Emily had never been secretive before. Hell, half the time, I was the one showing her how to use her apps. But now, she'd light up at notifications and smirk at the screen like she was sharing a private joke with the world. "Who's that?" I asked one night, keeping my voice light. "Oh, just Stacy from work," she said, waving it off. "She's going through a breakup." Stacy, the infamous co-worker's scapegoat. I didn't know it then, but Stacy would turn out to be the most overused excuse in Emily's arsenal. At this point, my brain started to feel like a broken record. Am I crazy? Am I imagining things? But it wasn't just one thing. It was the cologne, the playlist, the phone, and the way she started dressing like we were still dating. Tight skirts, bold lipstick, heels she used to complain about. I wanted to think it was for me, but let's be honest. When was the last time we'd even had a date night? Still, I didn't say anything. I didn't want to be that guy. I told myself I was being insecure, that her new job at the marketing firm was just giving her confidence. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. And then one night, I heard her laugh. Not just any laugh. It was this low, flirty chuckle I hadn't heard in years. The kind she used to save for me. She was on the phone in the kitchen, her back turned, whispering so quietly I couldn't make out the words. I walked in, and she spun around so fast she almost dropped her phone. "Who was that?" I asked. "Stacy," she said without missing a beat, her voice just a little too casual. "She's having a meltdown about her ex again." Right. Stacy. At that moment, I wanted to believe her. I really did, but deep down I knew something was broken. And whatever it wasn't going to fix itself. I wish I could say I confronted Emily right then and there, that I called her out on all the weird behavior. But I didn't. I told myself I was imagining things, that I'd let my paranoia get the best of me. Still, the doubts didn't leave me. They were like shadows, lurking in the corners of my mind. It wasn't until 2 weeks later that I found something I couldn't ignore. Emily had left her work bag on the kitchen counter. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. Her bag was her space, and I wasn't about to go snooping. But as I reached over to grab a coffee mug, I noticed something sticking out of the side pocket. A receipt. It wasn't unusual for Emily to have receipts in her bag, but this one caught my eye because it was from a restaurant I didn't recognize. Curiosity got the better of me, and I picked it up. The receipt was dated last Friday, a night she'd told me she was at a work dinner. It was from an upscale Italian place downtown, the kind of place we used to go to for anniversaries. The kind of place you don't go alone. The total was what made my stomach drop. 2 entrees, a bottle of wine, and dessert. Way more than she would have ordered for herself. When she got home later that evening, I casually brought it up. "Hey, how was that dinner with your team the other night?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. She looked at me for a split second longer than usual before answering. "Oh, it was fine. A little boring, honestly. Just the usual office gossip." I nodded, watching her carefully. "Where'd you guys go?" She paused just for a fraction of a second. "Some bar near the office. Nothing fancy." I don't know why, but the way she said it made me feel sick. I wanted to scream, to throw the receipt on the table, and demand an explanation. But I didn't. Instead, I slipped the receipt into my pocket and nodded, pretending to believe her. That night, as she scrolled through her phone in bed, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. My mind raced with questions I didn't have answers to. Who'd she been with? Why had she lied? And what the hell was I supposed to do now? The next day, as Emily headed out the door for another client meeting, I couldn't shake the weight in my chest. Every time I thought about the receipt, her paused answers, and her phone always glued to her hand, my frustration bubbled closer to the surface. I needed to know the truth. While cleaning up the kitchen, I noticed her tablet on the counter, left behind in her rush. My first instinct was to ignore it. I wasn't proud of the idea of snooping. But the thought of her laughing on the phone that night, the look of surprise when I walked in, gnawed at me. Before I knew it, I was reaching for the device, my hands shaking as I powered it on. The lock screen was familiar, our daughter Chloe's smiling face. But the second the screen unlocked, I saw something that stopped me cold, a message notification. It wasn't from anyone I knew. It wasn't from work. It was from someone saved in her contacts as AJ. "AJ, you free tonight? Last week was amazing. I haven't stopped thinking about you." I stared at the screen, my heart hammering in my chest. My gut screamed at me to put the tablet down, to walk away and pretend I hadn't seen it. But I couldn't. Not now. I opened the Messenger app, half expecting to find nothing, or maybe just innocent messages that I'd misunderstood. But the moment the chat opened, my world tilted on its axis. "AJ, you should have stayed the night. I didn't want to let you go. Emily, you know I can't. Jason would notice. But I wish I could have." My mouth went dry as I scrolled further, the messages becoming more explicit. They spoke in code, but it wasn't hard to figure out what they were talking about. Hotels, dinners, plans to meet halfway. Every word was a dagger. One message from her stood out, hitting me like a truck. "Emily, I feel alive with you. I don't feel like just a mom or a wife. I feel like me again." I slammed the tablet down, my breath coming in short gasps. This wasn't just flirting. This was real. A full-blown affair. My head spun as I tried to figure out who this AJ could be. The messages were vague. No details about his life. No pictures, just snippets of conversation. But one thing was clear. Emily had been hiding this for months. I was about to close the chat when a new message popped up. "AJ, still good for tonight? I'll pick you up around 8. Same spot." I froze. Tonight? She was meeting him tonight? My stomach twisted with a mix of rage and determination. I couldn't sit around and do nothing. If she thought she could sneak off again, I was going to make damn sure she didn't get away with it. When Emily came home that evening, she was in a rush, her phone glued to her hand as usual. She barely looked at me as she grabbed her purse and keys. "Don't wait up," she said casually. "This meeting might run late." I forced a smile, nodding as though I believed her. "Good luck with the client," I said, my voice even. As soon as she left, I grabbed my jacket and car keys, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I didn't know where she was going, but I had a strong suspicion. The messages had mentioned a hotel, one downtown we'd gone to years ago for a romantic weekend. If that was their same spot, I'd find her there. I parked across the street from the hotel, my heart pounding as I watched the entrance. A few minutes later, a sleek black car pulled up. The driver stepped out, a tall man in a sharp suit. I couldn't see his face clearly, but there was an air of confidence about him, the kind that made my blood boil. He stood by the passenger's side, checking his watch. And then, Emily arrived. She stepped out of her car, wearing a tight black dress I hadn't seen before, her hair curled and her lips painted a bold red. My stomach churned as I watched her walk up to him, her face lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in years. She kissed him on the cheek, quick but intimate, and they headed inside. I couldn't just sit there. Not anymore. I threw the car door open, my hands shaking as I stepped onto the sidewalk. But before I could cross the street, I heard someone call my name. Jason. I spun around, startled, and there she was, Stacy, Emily's co-worker, the infamous scapegoat from all those excuses. She looked just as shocked as I felt. "What are you doing here?" she asked, glancing at the hotel. "I could ask you the same thing," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Her expression darkened. "You're here for Emily, aren't you?" Something about her tone sent a chill down my spine. "What do you know, Stacy?" She hesitated, then sighed. "Jason, there's something you need to see." She held up her phone, scrolling through a series of photos. My blood ran cold as I saw Emily and AJ in various locations, restaurants, bars, even an airport. It wasn't just a hotel. She'd been meeting him everywhere, leaving behind a trail of lies. "She's been doing this for months," Stacy said quietly. "I didn't know how to tell you." The ground felt like it was shifting beneath me. Emily hadn't just betrayed me. She'd built an entire double life. And now, there was no denying it. I stared at Stacy, her phone still glowing with the damning photos. My mind raced. Emily had been lying to me for months, maybe longer. And now, she was inside that hotel, with him, AJ, whoever the hell he was. "Why are you showing me this now?" I asked, my voice tight. Stacy hesitated. "I didn't know how to tell you before. I suspected something for a while. Emily's not exactly discreet at work." "Not discreet?" I repeated, my tone dripping with disbelief. "You mean she's bragging about this?" "Not outright," she said, looking away. "But she talks about these client dinners and work trips like there's some kind of adventure. Everyone knows something's up. I just couldn't watch it anymore, Jason. You deserve to know." I didn't know whether to thank her or scream. The anger bubbling inside me wasn't just directed at Emily anymore. It was at myself for not seeing it sooner, for trusting her when the signs were all there. "Stay here," I said, my voice cold. I handed Stacy her phone back and started toward the hotel. The lobby was sleek and modern, filled with the kind of people who didn't ask questions. I scanned the room quickly, looking for Emily and him. The receptionist shot me a wary glance as I headed toward the elevators, but I didn't stop. The ride up felt endless. I didn't even know what I'd do when I found them. Part of me wanted to kick down the door, to catch them in the act and make them see what they'd done to me. Another part wanted to turn around and leave, to avoid seeing what I already knew was happening. When the elevator doors slid open, I stepped into the hallway and immediately spotted them at the far end. Emily was standing by a door, laughing at something AJ said. He was leaning casually against the wall, his hand resting lightly on her waist. They didn't even notice me at first. Emily. Her name came out sharp and loud, cutting through the air like a knife. Both of them froze, their heads snapping toward me. "Jason," she said, her voice filled with fake surprise. "What are you doing here?" I took a few steps closer, my hands clenched into fists. "Don't play dumb, Emily. I know exactly what you're doing." "Jason," AJ started, holding up his hands like I was some kind of threat. "I think you should calm down. Don't talk to me." I snapped, my glare cutting through him. "I'm not here for you." Emily stepped forward, her heels clicking against the tiled floor. "Jason, this isn't what it looks like." I laughed bitterly. "Really? So you're not standing outside a hotel room with this guy, wearing a dress I've never seen before?" She hesitated, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to come up with an excuse. Finally, she crossed her arms and said, "Look, I don't have to explain myself to you. You've been distant for months, Jason. What did you expect? Distant?" I repeated, my voice rising. "I've been breaking my back for this family, for you. And this is how you repay me." She rolled her eyes, her expression shifting to something cold and dismissive. Don't make this bigger than it is. It's not like we've been happy for a while. I felt my blood boil. Don't you dare try to blame this on me, Emily. You lied to me. You betrayed me. Own it. Before she could respond, AJ stepped in again, putting himself between us. I think you should leave, man. This isn't the time or place. And who the hell are you? I shot back. What kind of guy sneaks around with someone else's wife? His jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything. Smart move. Emily sighed dramatically, like she was already bored of the confrontation. You're being ridiculous, Jason. Let's talk about this at home. Home, I said, my voice dripping with venom. You think I'm going back to that house with you? After this? She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand to stop her. Don't bother. I've already seen the messages. I know about the dinners, the hotels. You've been cheating on me for months. For the first time, her face paled. You went through my stuff? Yeah, I said coldly. And thank God I did. I turned and walked back to the elevator, leaving Emily and AJ standing there. My chest felt like it was going to explode, but I kept moving. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break down. As I stepped outside the hotel, Stacy was still there, pacing near her car. She froze when she saw me, her face a mix of guilt and concern. Her presence felt out of place, almost suspicious, and in my adrenaline-fueled state, I wasn't in the mood for more mysteries. What are you even doing here, Stacy? I demanded, my voice harsher than I intended. She hesitated, looking down at the ground like she was trying to decide how much to say. Jason, I can explain. Then explain, I said, folding my arms. Because if you're about to tell me you just happened to show up at the same hotel where my wife is cheating on me, I'm not buying it. Her face flushed, and she looked away, biting her lip. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you this for a while, she started, her voice shaky. I didn't want to get involved, but I couldn't just sit back and do nothing anymore. Do nothing about what? I pressed, my patience thinning. She sighed heavily, finally meeting my eyes. I came here to stop her. That caught me off guard. What are you talking about? Jason, she said, her tone pleading. Emily's been doing this for months. Everyone at the office knows she's not as careful as she thinks. She thinks people don't notice when she sneaks off or when she spends hours texting clients. But we do. I clenched my jaw, my anger bubbling up again. So, why didn't you tell me before? Why wait until now? Because I was scared, she admitted. Emily's not exactly the kind of person you can reason with. You know how she gets when someone questions her. She wasn't wrong. Emily had always had a way of turning things around, making you feel like you were the problem. But Stacy's answer didn't fully satisfy me. Something still didn't add up. Why the hotel? I asked, narrowing my eyes. Why show up here? Stacy hesitated again, then took a deep breath. Because I knew she'd be here tonight. She's been talking about this big night with him all week. I couldn't stand the thought of her getting away with it again. I thought, maybe if I showed up and confronted her myself, I could stop it before you had to find out. I blinked, stunned by her words. You were going to confront her? For me? Yes, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't let her keep doing this to you, Jason. You don't deserve it. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Stacy wasn't just some bystander in this mess. She'd put herself on the line to do what no one else would. And the way she looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of guilt and determination, made my chest tighten. You didn't have to do that, I said, my voice softening despite my anger. I know, she said, wiping at her eyes. But I couldn't stand by and watch anymore. I've known you for years, Jason. You're a good man. You didn't deserve this. As I processed her words, another question crept into my mind. How did you know they'd be here tonight? I asked, suspicion creeping back in. She hesitated, then pulled out her phone. Emily doesn't realize her work email is linked to the office server. I've seen the reservations, the messages she sent him. It wasn't hard to figure out. My stomach twisted. Stacy had been keeping tabs on Emily for me. But why? Why are you going through all this trouble? I asked, narrowing my eyes. Why do you care so much? Her face turned red, and she looked away. Because I know what it's like, she said quietly. I know what it's like to trust someone and have them rip your heart out. I wouldn't wish that on anyone, especially not you. Her confession caught me off guard, and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. Stacy had always been on the periphery of my life, a co-worker of Emily's who was friendly, but never close. Now, she was standing here, bearing her soul in the middle of a hotel parking lot. "Thank you," I said finally, the words feeling inadequate but genuine. "For telling me? For being here." She nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm sorry it came to this, Jason, but you needed to know." As I drove away from the hotel, Stacy's words replayed in my mind. Her willingness to stand up to Emily, to risk getting involved in something so messy, made me see her in a new light. She wasn't just a co-worker or a bystander. She was someone who cared enough to act when no one else would. And as much as I hated the betrayal I'd uncovered tonight, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of gratitude. I wasn't alone in this. Not anymore. How wrong I was then. After the confrontation at the hotel, I needed someone to talk to, someone who could help me make sense of the chaos swirling in my head. So I called my best friend, Ryan. Ryan and I had been close since college. He was the kind of guy who always had my back, no matter what, and I knew he'd drop everything to help me out. When he picked up the phone, his voice was warm and familiar, exactly what I needed in that moment. "Hey man," he said. "What's going on? Can I crash at your place for a bit?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I just can't be alone right now." "Of course," he said without hesitation. "Come over. We'll talk." When I got to Ryan's place, he greeted me with a bear hug and a cold beer. His apartment was cozy and cluttered, filled with the kind of warmth that made me feel safe, even if only for a little while. We sat on the couch, and I spilled everything: the suspicious behavior, the texts, the hotel, even Stacy showing up. Ryan listened intently, his face a mix of sympathy and anger as I recounted the events. "Jesus, Jason," he said when I finished. "I can't believe she'd do that to you. After everything you've done for her." "Yeah," I said bitterly. "Well, I guess I wasn't enough." "Don't even go there," he snapped. "This isn't about you not being enough. This is about her being selfish." I nodded, grateful for his unwavering support. For a moment, I felt like I could finally breathe again. But then Ryan's expression shifted, his brow furrowing. "There's something that doesn't sit right with me, though," he said. "What?" I asked, taking a sip of my beer. "Stacy," he said slowly. "What the hell was she doing near the hotel? And why was she so eager to tell you everything?" "She said she wanted to stop Emily," I replied, though even as I said it, the words felt flimsy. "She knew about the affair and couldn't watch it anymore." Ryan frowned, leaning forward. "Jason, you know I've met Stacy before. At Chloe's birthday party last year, right?" "Yeah," I said, confused. "What about her?" I don't know, man. There's something off about her. She was nice enough, but I got the sense she was trying a little too hard to be in your good graces. Almost like she was, I don't know, angling for something." I blinked, taken aback. "Stacy's been nothing but helpful. She's the one who showed me the photos. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't even know the full extent of what Emily's been doing." Ryan held up a hand. "I'm not saying she's lying. I'm just saying be careful. People don't just insert themselves into situations like this without a reason." I shook my head, brushing off his concerns. She was just trying to help. She saw what Emily was doing and thought I deserved to know. "Maybe," Ryan said, his voice cautious. "But don't be so quick to trust her. Just because Emily's a mess doesn't mean Stacy's an angel. Watch your back." That night, as I lay on Ryan's couch, his words echoed in my head. I didn't want to believe Stacy had any ulterior motives. She'd been kind to me, supportive in a way I desperately needed. But Ryan wasn't the type to say things lightly. If he had a bad feeling about Stacy, maybe there was something to it. Still, I couldn't bring myself to doubt her. After everything that had happened, she was one of the only people who'd been honest with me. And right now, I wasn't ready to question that. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and no matter how much I tried to push it aside, it lingered in the back of my mind. What did Stacy really want? And why was she so involved? For now, I had more immediate things to deal with, like figuring out how to start over. But I knew one thing for sure. The more I learned, the less I felt I could trust anyone. For a couple of days, I ignored Stacy's texts and calls. Each time my phone buzzed with her name, A fresh wave of anger surged through me. I wasn't ready to hear her excuses or fake apologies. The confrontation at the hotel was still too raw, too fresh. I needed space to process everything. In those 2 days, I stayed at Ryan's place, trying to keep myself grounded. Ryan kept reminding me to focus on Chloe, to think about what kind of life I wanted for her going forward. His words helped, but the anger lingered, simmering just below the surface. By the third day, though, I knew I couldn't avoid Emily forever. As much as I wanted to pretend she didn't exist, we had a daughter, and ignoring her wasn't a long-term solution. So, I finally answered one of her calls. We agreed to meet at the house, the one we used to share, the one that now felt like a stranger's home. When I walked in, Emily was already waiting in the living room, looking more subdued than I'd ever seen her. Gone was the confident, dismissive woman from the hotel. In her place was someone who seemed desperate. "Jason," she said, standing up as I entered. "Thank you for coming." "Don't thank me," I said coldly, sitting down across from her. "Say what you need to say." She flinched but nodded. I wanted to apologize. For everything. I know I hurt you. I know I ruined things. But I'm ready to make it right. I raised an eyebrow, my arms crossed. "Make it right? How exactly?" She took a deep breath. "I've already broken things off with AJ. It's over. It was a mistake, Jason. A terrible, stupid mistake. I wasn't thinking straight, but I want to fix our family. For Chloe." Her words felt hollow, like she was reading from a script. "You think saying sorry fixes this?" I said, my voice rising. "You lied to me. You betrayed me. And now, you want to sweep it under the rug because it's convenient for you." "I'm not trying to sweep it under the rug," she snapped, her tone defensive. "I'm trying to save what's left of our family. Doesn't Chloe deserve that?" "Don't you dare use Chloe as an excuse," I shot back. "You weren't thinking about her when you were sneaking around with him." Her face turned red, a mix of shame and anger. "I was unhappy, Jason. You were distant, always busy with work, always in your own world. I felt invisible." "Oh, so this is my fault now?" I said bitterly. "I was working to provide for this family while you were out living your little fantasy. Don't try to pin this on me." The argument escalated quickly. Every word out of her mouth felt like another dagger, another attempt to deflect blame. And the more we fought, the clearer it became that there was no saving this. "You know what?" she said finally, her voice trembling with rage. "If you're going to act like this, maybe I need to protect myself. Maybe I need to protect Chloe." I froze, my heart pounding. "What the hell are you talking about?" She folded her arms, her expression hard. "If you keep this up, this anger, this hostility, I'll have no choice but to get a restraining order. For me and for Chloe." My vision blurred with fury. "You think you can take Chloe away from me? You think any court would give you custody after what you've done?" "I don't want to take her away," she said, her voice calmer now, but no less cutting. "But I won't let her be around someone who's out of control." "Out of control?" I barked. "You're the one who destroyed our marriage. You're the one who lied and cheated. And now you're trying to paint me as the bad guy? Unbelievable." She didn't respond, her silence more infuriating than any words could have been. I stood up, my hands clenched in a fist at my sides. "I'm done, Emily. I'm done letting you manipulate me, twist this situation to make yourself look like the victim. I've already talked to a lawyer, and I'm going to take this as far as I need to. I'm filing for divorce, and I'm going for custody of Chloe. I'll take the house too if I have to." Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she looked genuinely scared. "Jason, you don't mean that." "I mean every word," I said coldly. "You brought this on yourself, Emily. Now you get to live with the consequences." Without waiting for her response, I turned and walked out of the house, slamming the door behind me. My heart was racing, my mind spinning with everything that had just happened. But for the first time, I felt a sense of clarity. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about Chloe, about giving her the stable, honest home she deserved. And I wasn't going to let Emily or anyone else stand in my way. The drive back to Ryan's apartment was a blur, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Emily's threat to get a restraining order had been a low blow, but it had also solidified one thing in my mind. I wasn't going to let her manipulate the situation anymore. If she wanted a fight, I'd give her one, but not on her terms. This time, I'd be prepared. When I walked into Ryan's apartment, he looked up from the TV, immediately sensing my mood. "Rough day?" he asked, offering me a beer. "More like a rough life," I muttered, collapsing onto the couch. I told him about the argument, about Emily's sudden apology and her not-so-subtle threat to take Chloe away. Ryan let out a low whistle. "Dumb, man. She's really trying to spin this, huh?" "Yeah," I said, running a hand through my hair. "And I'm not letting her get away with it. I've already talked to Lisa, my lawyer, and I'm moving forward with the divorce. I want custody of Chloe, and I'm not backing down." "That's the right move," Ryan said, nodding. "But you know this isn't going to be easy. Emily's going to fight dirty. She already is." "I know," I said, my jaw tightening. "But I don't care. Chloe deserves better than this." The next morning, I called Lisa to update her on the situation. She listened carefully as I recounted my argument with Emily, including her threat to file a restraining order. "That's a common tactic," Lisa said. "She's trying to paint you as volatile to gain leverage. But if we document everything, your interactions with her, your involvement with Chloe, we can counter it. The key is to stay calm and avoid giving her any ammunition." "I'm calm," I said, though my clenched fists told a different story. "I just want to make sure she doesn't twist this into something it's not." "Then let's focus on what we can control," Lisa said. "Do you have any evidence of her infidelity or behavior that could be relevant in court?" "Yeah," I said. "I've got the texts, the receipts, the photos Stacy gave me. Should I send those to you?" "Absolutely," she said. "We'll use them to build a strong case. And Jason, I can't stress this enough. No matter how much she provokes you, don't engage. Let me handle it." Later that afternoon, I was reviewing old photos of Chloe for a project at her preschool when there was a knock at the door. Ryan was out, so I opened it, expecting a delivery or one of the neighbors. Instead, I found Stacy standing there, her face pale and uncertain. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "I needed to talk to you," she said, her eyes darting around nervously. "Please, Jason, just hear me out." I sighed but stepped aside, motioning for her to come in. She perched on the edge of the couch, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "I heard about the fight with Emily," she began. She's telling people things that aren't true. About you." "Of course she is," I said bitterly. "What else is new?" "She's saying you're unstable," Stacy continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "That you yelled at her, threatened her. She's trying to paint you as dangerous." "Let her try," I said, anger bubbling up. "She's the one who cheated. She's the one who's unstable." Stacy hesitated, then leaned forward. "Jason, I want to help you. Whatever you need, evidence, a character statement, anything, I'll do it." I looked at her, trying to read her intentions. Ryan's warning from a few nights ago echoed in my mind. Don't be so quick to trust her. "Why do you care so much?" I asked, my tone cautious. She flushed, looking down at her hands. "Because I care about you. I always have, and I hate seeing what she's doing to you." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. Part of me was grateful for her support, but another part, the part Ryan had planted doubt in, wondered if there was more to her motives than she was letting on. "I appreciate it," I said finally, "but I've got this under control. My lawyer's handling everything." Stacy nodded, but the flicker of disappointment in her eyes didn't escape me. "Just let me know if you need anything, okay?" "I will," I said, showing her to the door. As I watched her walk away, I couldn't shake the unease in my chest. Stacy had been helpful, no doubt about it, but her involvement felt too personal, too intense. I couldn't afford to let emotions cloud my judgment. Not now. I turned back to the photos of Chloe, my resolve hardening. This wasn't about Emily or Stacy or anyone else. This was about my daughter and giving her the stability she deserved. And no matter how messy things got, I wasn't going to let her down. The days after my argument with Emily felt like I was walking a tightrope. Every interaction with her was strained, clipped, and filled with an undercurrent of tension. For Chloe's sake, I tried to keep things civil, but it was like trying to have a polite conversation with a hurricane. At the same time, Life at Ryan's apartment started to feel like a temporary haven. Ryan had a knack for keeping things light, cracking jokes when I was brooding or pulling me out of my head with takeout and a game of cards. But even his best efforts couldn't erase the nagging thoughts that followed me everywhere. How had things gone so wrong? My time with Chloe became the only bright spot in my life. She'd stay with me at Ryan's a couple of nights a week, and I'd do everything I could to make it feel like home. I borrowed some of her favorite books from the house, bought her a new stuffed animal she immediately named Sparkles, and set up a little art station in the corner of the living room. One evening, as we were painting pictures of her favorite cartoon characters, she looked up at me and said, "Daddy, do you like Sparkles?" "Of course I do," I said, smiling. "She's perfect." She giggled, her cheeks smudged with paint. "Mommy doesn't like her. She said she's too sparkly." I froze for a moment, not sure how to respond. "Well, Mommy's allowed to have her opinions," I said carefully. "But Sparkles is yours, and that's what matters." Chloe seemed satisfied with that answer, but her comment stuck with me. It was a reminder of how different Emily and I had become, not just in the big ways, but in the little ones too. Stacy hadn't let up. She texted me almost daily, asking how I was doing, if I needed anything, or if there was any update on Emily. At first, I appreciated her concern. It felt good to have someone in my corner. But as the days passed, her messages started to feel overwhelming, almost possessive. One evening, she called just as I was putting Chloe to bed. I let it go to voicemail, figuring I'd call her back later. But she texted right after, asking if I was okay. When I didn't reply, she followed up with another message. "Did something happen? Are you mad at me?" I stared at the screen, unsure of how to respond. Was I imagining things, or was she pushing boundaries that didn't need to be crossed? Ryan noticed my hesitation. "That her again?" he asked, nodding at my phone. "Yeah," I said, rubbing the back of my neck. "She's been persistent." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Dude, I'm telling you something's off with her. I get that she's trying to help, but it feels like she's got her own agenda." "She's just being nice," I said, though the words felt hollow even as I said them. "Maybe," Ryan said, leaning back in his chair. "But don't let her get too close. You're already dealing with enough." A few days later, I went to drop Chloe off at the house. Emily met me at the door, her arms crossed and her expression as icy as ever. Chloe ran inside, chattering happily about Sparkles and the pictures we'd painted, completely oblivious to the tension between us. "We need to talk," Emily said once Chloe was out of earshot. "About what?" I asked, bracing myself. "I don't want Stacy around Chloe," she said bluntly. Her comment caught me off guard. "What are you talking about? Stacy's barely been around her." "I've heard things," she said, her tone sharp. "She's obsessed with you, Jason. It's not healthy. I don't want that kind of energy near our daughter." I narrowed my eyes. "You don't get to dictate who's in my life, Emily. Not after everything you've done." "This isn't about me," she snapped. "It's about Chloe. And I don't think Stacy's intentions are as pure as you think." I wanted to argue, to throw her hypocrisy back in her face, but something about her words stuck with me. Was she just trying to stir the pot? Or was there something I wasn't seeing? That night, after Chloe was back with Emily, I sat in Ryan's living room, replaying the conversation in my head. Stacy's constant messages, her eagerness to help, her sudden appearance at the hotel, it all started to feel like pieces of a puzzle I didn't fully understand. Ryan walked in, handing me a beer. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Emily said something about Stacy. I said, hesitating. "She doesn't want her around Chloe. Says she's obsessed." Ryan gave me a knowing look. And I don't know if she's just messing with me or if there's something to it," I admitted. Ryan sat down across from me, his expression serious. "Look, man, I know you're in a tough spot right now, and Stacy's been a big help. But you've got to trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is." 3 weeks had passed since my argument with Emily. Things were starting to settle, at least as much as they could in the middle of a divorce. My lawyer, Lisa, was handling most of the legal stuff, which left me free to focus on getting my life back together. I'd finally moved out of Ryan's place and into a small, rented house not too far from where Chloe went to preschool. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The living room still smelled faintly of fresh paint, and the furniture was a mishmash of hand-me-downs and Craigslist finds, but it felt good to have my own space. Chloe loved it too. She'd already claimed her little bedroom and plastered the walls with drawings of rainbows and unicorns. One afternoon, as I was unpacking a box of books, my phone buzzed with a text from Stacy. "Stacy, hey, want to grab a drink tonight? I feel like we both need a break from reality." I stared at the message for a moment. Things between Stacy and me had been complicated. I couldn't deny that she'd been there for me during some of the darkest moments of my life. But Ryan's warnings and Emily's accusations still lingered in the back of my mind. But maybe that was all noise. Maybe I just needed to let go and enjoy a normal night out for once. Me? Sure. Where and when? We met at a little dive bar on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where no one cared who you were or why you were there. Stacy was already waiting at a corner table when I arrived, a smile lighting up her face as she waved me over. "You look like you could use a drink," she said, sliding a cold beer across the table to me. "More like 3, I joked, taking a sip. The evening started off light, just the two of us swapping stories and laughing about the absurdities of life. Stacy had a way of making me forget about everything else, at least for a little while. She told me about her failed attempts at online dating, complete with dramatic reenactments of some of the worst first dates I'd ever heard of. I found myself laughing so hard my sides hurt. Somewhere between the second and third drink, the conversation turned more serious. "Do you ever think about what's next?" Stacy asked, tracing the rim of her glass with her finger. "For me?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah," she said softly. "After all of this, Emily, the divorce, what do you want your life to look like?" I leaned back in my chair, staring up at the ceiling as I thought about her question. Honestly, I don't know. I've been so focused on just surviving that I haven't had time to think about the future. But I know one thing. I want Chloe to have a good life. I want her to feel safe and loved, no matter what. Stacy smiled, her eyes warm. "You're a good dad, Jason. She's lucky to have you." Her words hit me harder than I expected, and for a moment I couldn't speak. I just nodded, taking another sip of my beer. Later that night, we ended up outside the bar, sitting on the hood of my car and staring up at the sky. The air was crisp, and the stars were brighter than I'd seen in years. "Look," Stacy said suddenly, pointing at the sky. "A shooting star?" I turned just in time to catch it, a quick, shimmering streak of light cutting across the darkness. "Make a wish," she said, her voice soft. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the moment. I didn't know what I wished for. Exactly peace, maybe closure, a chance to start over. When I opened my eyes, Stacy was looking at me, her face illuminated by the faint glow of a nearby street lamp. Without thinking, I leaned in and kissed her. The kiss deepened quickly, and before I knew it, we were back at my place. The tension that had been building between us for weeks finally broke, and everything else, the divorce, Emily, the uncertainty of the future, faded away. It wasn't just about the physical connection, though that was undeniably intense. It was about two people finding comfort in each other, filling the gaps that life had left behind. For the first time in months, I felt wanted, needed. Afterward, we lay tangled together on the couch, the room silent except for the sound of our breathing. Stacy rested her head on my chest, her fingers tracing lazy circles on my arm. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. "Yeah," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. "I think I am." She smiled, her eyes closing as she settled against me. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself relax, letting the weight of the world lift off my shoulders, if only for a little while. I woke up the next morning to the sound of voices in the living room. Groggy and disoriented, I grabbed a t-shirt and stumbled out of the bedroom, only to freeze in the doorway. There, standing in my rented living room, were Stacy and Emily. Emily's face was flushed with fury, her hands clenched into fists. Stacy, on the other hand, looked calm. Too calm. She had a faint smile on her lips, like she was watching a show she'd been dying to see. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, my voice cutting through the tension. Emily turned to me, her eyes blazing. "That's what I'd like to know." Stacy called me in the middle of the night, saying there was some kind of emergency. "And now she's here, in your house." My stomach dropped. I looked at Stacy, who was leaning casually against the wall, her arms crossed. "Stacy," I said slowly. "What's going on?" Her smile widened, and she straightened up. "Oh, Jason, don't look so confused. I just thought it was time for some honesty." Stacy turned to Emily, her tone dripping with mock sweetness. "You know, Emily, you've taken so much from me over the years. My promotion, my hard work, my respect. And let's not forget, my boyfriend." Emily's face twisted in confusion. "What are you talking about? AJ wasn't the first, was he?" Stacy said, her voice turning sharp. "Remember Greg? The guy I dated for over a year? The one you just had to have? You didn't even care that I loved him. You slept with him behind my back and then dumped him like trash." Emily's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. "And then there was the promotion," Stacy continued, her voice rising. "The one I worked my ass off for, while you spent half your time schmoozing clients and the other half pretending you knew what you were doing. You didn't earn that promotion. Emily, I did. You just took the credit for my work." I stood there, stunned, as the pieces started to fall into place. Stacy's intense involvement in my life, her obsession with Emily, even her offer to help with the divorce. It had all been leading to this moment. "You used me," I said, my voice low. "This was all about revenge, wasn't it?" Stacy turned to me, her expression softening slightly. "Yes, Jason, I used you. But don't act like you didn't benefit from it. I gave you the truth about Emily, didn't I? I helped you see her for what she really is." I clenched my fists, anger boiling in my chest. "You didn't do this for me. You did this for yourself." Emily, finally finding her voice, exploded. "You're out of your mind. You manipulated all of this. Jason, me, everything. You had no right. No right." Stacy shot back, her calm demeanor slipping. "You want to talk about rights, Emily? You've been taking what you want from people your whole life, without a second thought about who you're hurting. This is just karma catching up with you." Emily's face turned red, and for a moment, I thought she might actually hit Stacy. Instead, she turned to me. "And you let her into your life? You let her manipulate you too." "I didn't know," I said sharply. "But let's not pretend you're the victim here, Emily. You're the one who cheated. You're the one who lied." Emily glared at both of us, her anger radiating like heat. "You're both pathetic." As Emily grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door, Stacy called after her, her voice sweet and venomous. "Oh, and Emily, I'll be filing a complaint with HR first thing Monday. Something about sleeping with clients. It's frowned upon, isn't it? Especially for someone in a leadership role." Emily spun around, her face a mask of rage. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me," Stacy said, her smile returning. "I've got plenty of evidence. And let's face it, you're not exactly the office favorite these days." Emily stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. I turned to Stacy, my emotions a tangled mess of anger, disbelief, and, dare I admit it, a small, twisted satisfaction. Emily had hurt me deeply, and seeing her knocked off her pedestal felt good, even if it came at the hands of someone as calculating as Stacy. "You need to leave," I said finally, my voice cold. Stacy raised an eyebrow. "Seriously? After everything I've done for you?" "Yeah," I said firmly. "You didn't do it for me. You did it for yourself. I'm not going to be a pawn in whatever game you're playing." Stacy shrugged, grabbing her jacket. "Suit yourself, Jason. But don't forget, you wouldn't have any of this closure if it weren't for me." She walked out without another word, leaving me alone in the house. As the door clicked shut, I sank onto the couch, my head in my hands. I didn't love Stacy, but I couldn't deny that her actions had brought some clarity to my life. Emily's lies, her betrayals, her selfishness. It was all out in the open now. And while I was furious at Stacy for using me, I couldn't help but feel a grim sense of satisfaction. The silence in the house was deafening after Stacy left. For the first time in weeks, there were no arguments, no dramatic confrontations, no ulterior motives swirling around me. Just me, sitting in the aftermath of everything that had happened. I leaned back on the couch, staring at the ceiling, and let the events of the past few months wash over me. Emily's betrayal, Stacy's manipulation, the anger, the heartbreak. It all felt like pieces of a life I no longer recognized. It was messy, chaotic, and painful, but as I sat there, a strange sense of clarity began to emerge. Looking back, it was clear that my marriage to Emily had been crumbling long before the affair. The trust, the connection, the partnership we once had, it had eroded over time, replaced by resentment, secrets, and selfishness. Emily's choices had been the final nail in the coffin, but the cracks had been there all along. And then there was Stacy. Her confession had been a gut punch, a reminder that not everyone who offers help has pure intentions. I'd been a pawn in her game of revenge, a tool she used to settle old scores. But as much as I hated being used, I couldn't deny that Stacy had forced me to confront the truth about Emily. Without her, I might still be clinging to the illusion of a marriage that was already dead. Emily's life had unraveled in a way I never could have imagined. Stacy's threat to report her to HR had been more than an empty promise. Within days, rumors about Emily's client relationships had begun to circulate at her office, and I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd been put on probation. Her once glamorous career, the thing she'd sacrificed everything for, was now hanging by a thread. As for her personal life, AJ, the man she'd risked everything for, was nowhere to be found. According to Stacy, he'd ghosted her the moment things got messy. Emily was left to pick up the pieces alone, and while part of me felt a grim satisfaction at seeing her brought low, another part of me, maybe the part that still remembered the woman I'd once loved, felt pity. Through it all, Chloe had been my anchor. Every time I saw her, she reminded me of what truly mattered. I threw myself into being the best dad I could be, creating a stable and loving environment for her. My rented house became her second home, filled with her laughter and the colorful chaos of her art projects. One evening, as we sat on the floor coloring together, she looked up at me and said, "Daddy, I like your house. It's cozy." I smiled, my heart swelling. "I'm glad you like it, sweetie. This is your house too, you know." Her simple words reminded me that while everything else in my life had been turned upside down, my bond with Chloe remained unshaken. She was my North Star, guiding me forward no matter how rough the journey. The divorce process was still ongoing, but I was no longer consumed by anger or the need for revenge. Instead, I focused on building something new for myself and Chloe. I started working out again, joined a local dads group, and even took up photography, a hobby I'd abandoned years ago. Slowly but surely, I was rediscovering who I was outside of my marriage. As for Stacy, I cut ties with her completely. Her role in exposing Emily's affair was undeniable, but her manipulations had left a sour taste in my mouth. I didn't need people like her in my life, not anymore. Sitting in the quiet of my rented house one night, I thought about everything I'd been through. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the anger, it had all been brutal. But it had also been a catalyst, forcing me to confront hard truths and make changes I'd been avoiding for years. I learned a lot about people, about trust, and about myself. I'd learned that not everyone who offers help has your best interests at heart, that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and that sometimes walking away is the bravest thing you can do. But most importantly, I'd learned that life doesn't end with heartbreak. It begins anew, in the spaces where you let go of the past and make room for the future. If there's one thing I'd say to anyone going through something similar, it's this: don't lose yourself in someone else's mistakes. You're allowed to grieve, to be angry, to feel lost, but don't let it define you. Focus on what truly matters and build a life that makes you proud. That's what I'm doing now. It's not perfect and it's not easy, but it's mine. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm finally moving forward.